Then what did General tell you? Admiral Smithfield is a war hero and a head of a basketball match. I'm looking for something. I'm gonna steal something from the loo.
Man, the hell you doing? You gonna give me them damn glasses?
No, wait, listen what the Jew would tell you.
No,
No,
wait,
wait,
I told you about coming in here and stealing stuff, man. You stink, you smell like asphalt and burnt spoons. Now stop coming in here and taking my shit.
Who are you to wave your finger? You must have been out your head. I hold deep in muddy waters. You practically raised the dead. Rob the grave to snow the cradle, then burn the evidence down. Soapbox house of cars and glass.
Yeah, now I guess you can blame Derek Dooley for that ass whipping. Y'all blame him for everything else.
You must have been.
Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also, and in addition to all that as well, back to the spring schedule previews today, right? We've done a series of teams. We're going to do a bunch more. Up today, the Tennessee Vols. Now, I know that Tennessee is a basketball school who hasn't won the SEC tournament since 1979 and has never made a Final Four in school history, but there are still a few Tennessee-type people around who are pretending to be football fans, so I hope you guys enjoy this video. We're going to do it the same way we've been doing all these other videos. We're going to take a look at a little bit about what Tennessee lost from last year, sort of put a wrap on what they did last year, look at what they got coming up for this year, and then we'll throw the schedule up on the screen and try to get a general idea of like a best case, worst case scenario for what Tennessee's 2019 season might look like. Here we go. All right, shout out to Dane M over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. I really appreciate you supporting the channel, sir. I hope you enjoyed today's video. This video comes as a request from Dane over on the Patreon page. I'm going to do a whole bunch of teams, but the ones that I'm doing first are teams that were suggested by people over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. I really appreciate all you guys who have joined up over there. I really can't tell you how much it means to me. If you want to join up on the Uncle Lou Patreon page and you're not already, there's a link in the description of this video and every video that says support the channel. Click that link, it'll take you over to the Patreon page, get yourself signed up. I'm going to do some suggestions from the comment section and stuff like that too, but I'm going to knock out the ones from the Patreon members first. There's been a few people make comments that I guess that's upsetting them or whatever. I appreciate everyone who watches here, but I have to do something for the Patreon members, so I'm just letting them pick first. I'm still going to do all the other teams that everybody wants to see. I promise. We're going to do a ton of these videos. We're also doing a live show tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do it Tuesday and Thursday this week at 10 p.m. Eastern, so I hope you guys will join us over there. We take some phone calls. We'll talk about March Madness, spring practice, college football, whatever it is you guys want to talk about. Join us tonight, 10 p.m. right here on the channel for that live show. And then again, Thursday night at the same time, 10 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and sometimes they're even watchable. Give this video a thumbs up if you're a Tennessee fan and you're excited for your chances in 2019, or if you're just a college football fan in general and you've been enjoying these the scheduled preview videos, give the video a thumbs up. That really helps a lot with the YouTube algorithms and how they push certain videos up on people's feeds and things like that. So would really appreciate it if you enjoyed the video. Just slap a like on it. Thank you. All right, Tennessee, 5-7 last year, right? Yeah, 5-7. So no bowl yet again. An improvement over the season before, though, of course, when they went 4-8 and winless in the SEC, which resulted in the departure of Lyle Butch Jones, who is now the head coach in waiting. I'm just kidding. I was about to make a joke about him being at Alabama last year. Forget it. Anyway, Jeremy Pruitt comes in from Alabama, right? First year ever as a head coach. He goes 5-7. Some impressive wins. And impressive in that he won a couple of games that most people didn't think Tennessee was going to win, right? He also lost a couple of games that some people thought Tennessee had a chance to win. Sort of typical for a first-year head coach, in my opinion. I don't think anybody can look at what Jeremy Pruitt did in year one and knock him and say, well, he went 5-7, he lost to Vandy and Mizzou, so he's going to be a terrible coach. I also don't think you can look at him and go, whoa, he beat Auburn and Kentucky, so he's going to be great. It's really just too early to tell. I mean, we got to give the guy 2-3 years to see what he can do there, right? But the best way to describe Jeremy Pruitt's season year one, I think, treading water, right? He didn't fall off the cliff. He didn't have a terrible season like Butch Jones did the year before. He won a couple of SEC games. Again, lost a couple maybe that you thought he should have won. I think it pretty much went the way most people thought it would go for Tennessee last year. I picked Tennessee to go 5-7 last year. They went 5-7. Who'd they lose to? Well, they lost week 1 to West Virginia, right? Game not really close. West Virginia ended up being a pretty good team for the majority of the season, right? Probably the third best team in the Big 12. So you lost that one week 1. And, of course, a string of SEC games, Florida, Georgia, Bama, South Carolina, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. More on the Vandy situation with Tennessee in a minute. Your wins, you had 5 wins, right? 3 were against high school teams that no one's ever heard of, lower classification teams, and, of course, 2 SEC wins being Kentucky and Auburn. Auburn really the big shocker there. Not very many people saw that coming. And Kentucky was a good team, too. So a couple of good wins there. Let's give credit where credit is due. Pruitt, year 2. Most starters are back for Tennessee. Now, this is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. And you know, you're going to say, I hate Tennessee. I've heard from Tennessee fans that have told me the same thing. Some of these starters that Tennessee has are not SEC caliber players. They're just not. Blame it on whatever you want. A lot of you still blaming Derek Dooley. Blame it on Lyle if you want. Blame it on Lane Kiffin. You can blame it on anybody, but the point is a lot of these guys you have returning are not at the talent level you need to be to compete in the SEC. Now, Tennessee did have a great recruiting class this past season. They finished 12th, I think it was, recruiting in the 2019 class. Always dangerous to rely on true freshmen for success in the SEC. Plugging in 1 or 2 freshmen here or there to supplement an otherwise talented roster, I mean, that can work out okay. But to expect 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know how many you're thinking here, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 freshmen to come in and start or make huge impacts year 1 in the SEC, I think that's asking for a lot. And that doesn't mean I'm not impressed with a lot of these freshmen at Clemson, that Tennessee signed. Obviously, I am. They had a good class, signed some 5-stars, some highly rated 4-stars. But to count on a bunch of those guys to make meaningful impacts in year 1, I think is it could be dangerous. New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Of course, offensive coordinator, you guys get Jim Chaney from UGA. Scored a lot of points under Jim Chaney at UGA, but Georgia by far the second most talented team in the SEC. A ton of offensive talent. You look at last year's team, 3 wide receivers and a tight end are about to be drafted off of last year's team, one of the best offensive lines in the SEC. So Jim Chaney had A++ parts to work with at Georgia. I think if Tennessee fans, and listen, this isn't a knock Jim Chaney thing or a knock Tennessee thing. If you're expecting Jim Chaney to come into Tennessee and put up the same sort of offensive numbers that he put up the last couple of years at Georgia, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Tennessee is a program right now that needs to look for improvement in small steps, in my mind. It has been a very long time since Tennessee has been relevant even within the SEC East. And you guys make jokes all the time about how terrible the SEC East is. Well, if the SEC East is terrible, Tennessee has been one of the worst teams in that division over this period of time that you guys are saying the SEC East is terrible. You need to look for small improvements here, and we'll talk about that when we get to the schedule and what kind of record you can be looking at. And I know there's always people in the comments section. I mean, look, I get it. It's the offseason. Everyone's undefeated. I know Tennessee's going 15-0 again next year like they have been every March. I know you guys are winning the East next year like you have been every March. I get all that, but I'm trying to live in reality for the purposes of this video. So Jim Chaney comes in. I think your offense will be better than last year because you return most starters, including your quarterback, and I think Jim Chaney will be able to get more out of what you have there than, was it Helton you had last year? Although people are really high on him too. I mean, he got a head coaching job for a reason. So we'll see, and we'll talk more about the offense here in a minute. New defensive coordinator Derek Ansley comes from Oakland, was at Alabama before that, defensive backs coach for Alabama and Oakland. Now he becomes your defensive coordinator. When you have a defensive head coach, defensive coordinator, in my mind, becomes less of a critical hire than the offensive coordinator, I think. We've seen some elite defensive coordinators struggle as a head coach when they've had problems filling the offensive coordinator role. Most notably, of course, Will Muschamp is famous for this. We went through some bad coordinators at Florida. A lot of South Carolina fans are questioning the offense now, even at South Carolina. So we'll see how Chaney works out for you guys in Knoxville. Now this guy, not a coordinator, but you bring this guy in here. You make Philip Fulmer your AD. Oh, okay, fine. You ran this guy out of town in 2008. Everyone hated him. You were losing to teams like Wyoming. We can't have this. We're Tennessee. How is it possible we're only winning 8-9 games a year? You run Phil Fulmer out of town because he loses to Wyoming. Meanwhile, Tennessee fans would give their left arm to win 8 or 9 games right now. But you're trying to get back to that heyday you had under Fulmer. You bring him in a couple of off seasons ago. Now who do you bring in as a wide receiver coach? None other than Tamarice Martin, better known to Tennessee fans who have a hard time pronouncing words with a lot of letters in them as T. Martin. But this chubba-lub here, Tamarice Martin, this guy has really packed on some pounds. I don't know what Tennessee is trying to do. Are you fat boy Phil Fulmer? Now you bring in Chaney. This guy has shut down buffets up and down the East Coast for years. And Tamarice Martin looks like an overweight Teletubby. But nevertheless, Chris Winkie, he was on your staff last year. You're moving him from running backs coach to quarterback coach. So anyway, there's a lot of shuffling going around on this coaching staff this year. My worry, now listen, there was nothing you could do about losing your offensive coordinator from last year. That was his decision. He left, took a head coaching job. You shouldn't stay with an offensive coordinator if he's bad, obviously, but to be changing offensive coordinators constantly is not good if you can help it. So we'll see how long Chaney now stays at Tennessee, depending on how they do this year. He's been around a long time too. Not sure how many more years he's going to spend coaching, but your quarterback situation, we'll talk about that because I've been high on Jared Guantanamo Bay in terms of his toughness. I don't think this guy's an elite quarterback. I don't think Tennessee fans think he's an elite quarterback. Can he have a better season this year than he had last year? Yeah, of course he can. He can improve a little. I don't think he's in the top half of quarterbacks in the SEC, though. I just don't. And it doesn't help when you have a guy that's in his fourth year. He's a redshirt junior, right? So he's in his fourth year. He's had 4 different offensive coordinators now, 4 different quarterbacks coaches, and of course he's on his second head coach in Jeremy Pruitt. Not a recipe for success there, in my opinion. You lose your best offensive lineman a while back, Trey Smith. This guy was an automatic NFL first rounder. He was one of the best offensive linemen in the SEC. I hate to see anybody have to quit football because of an injury. Now, there is some word that maybe he's trying to work his way back or whatever. It was a non-football thing, of course. He had blood clots in his legs, I believe. and sort of announced he was no longer going to be able to play football, but there's some chatter now that he may try to come back. We'll see. I hope he's able to come back. Honestly, he was the best player on y'all's team last year, and it wasn't close. Let's just be real. He's an automatic NFL starter. If he can get the blood clot situation under control, he's an automatic NFL starter the minute he goes pro. He's that good. You bring in, or you lose another guy too in Drew Richmond. But other than that, you bring back most of the pieces along your offensive line, which is a good thing, except for the fact that you had one of the worst offensive lines in America last year. When I watched Tennessee games, and I talked about this a lot last year. It's one of the reasons I named Jared Guantanamo Bay as my toughest player in the SEC when I did that superlative video at the end of the season. Guantanamo Bay spent the majority of the time on his back. I mean, I watched this guy get folded up like a Big Lots lawn chair over and over and over and over again last season, and he kept getting up. He had to come out a couple of times. He would always come right back in. He's the toughest player in the SEC, and you don't earn that reputation as a quarterback by having a great offensive line. Your offensive line was absolutely horrible. You bring all those people back. That's bad news in my opinion. Good news, we talked about your recruiting class already. The position group that you probably recruited the best at, offensive line, 2 5-stars. One has already enrolled for the spring. The other one will be coming in over the summer. Wouldn't surprise me to see one or both of those guys start or get significant playing time. I know what I said earlier in the video about not relying on a whole lot of freshmen, but the reality is your offensive line is so bad that you may not have no choice but to play 1 or 2 freshmen up there along the line. We'll see. You lose tight end Eli Wolf. He transfers out to Georgia. You sign the 2 5-stars, like I mentioned, to help replace some of those guys on the offensive line. You bring in Aubrey Solomon and D'Angelo Gibbs as defensive transfers. Now, one of these guys I'm convinced can be really, really good, and that's Aubrey Solomon. Now, he sort of got lost in the shuffle at Michigan because they had NFL defensive lines there. D'Angelo Gibbs had some issues at Georgia that were non-football related. I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he gets it turned around and straightened out. As far as I can tell, as of today, neither one of these players has been cleared to play in 2019. Now, a lot of players are getting waivers approved for transfers this offseason. So we'll see if Aubrey Solomon or D'Angelo Gibbs, either one, gets that waiver and is able to play in 2019. But as far as I can tell from looking it up this morning, and if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments section. I mean, there's not a whole lot of sports websites and blogs that are covering Tennessee Vols football anymore because the list of people who cares about it is shrinking by the minute. But I did try to look, and I couldn't find anything about their waivers getting approved. So as of today, we have to assume that they're not going to play in 2019, but I felt like I should mention those 2 names in this video because those are 2 pretty high-profile transfers that you have coming in, right? Quarterback Garantano, we talked about him. 4th year, 4th offense coordinator, 4th quarterback coach. Not a recipe for success. We'll see if Jim Chaney, Tamarese Martin, and Chris Winkie can get some stuff done with him this year. All right, here we go. We're going to throw the schedule up on the screen, and we're going to do this the same way we've been doing it all along. We'll go through it pretty quick. I'll give you some brief thoughts on a few of the games, and then at the end, we will try to come up with a best case, worst case scenario for Tennessee's 2019 regular season. Now, I'm still doing the series of preview videos over the summer where I go back through these schedules and pick an exact winner and a loser for every single game. So just to let you know, so at the end of today's video, we will get to a point where I say, okay, if everything goes right for Tennessee, I think they can win this many games. But if everything goes bad, I could see them only winning this many games. And that's all the goal is of this video, not to come up with an exact record. When I do these preview videos over the summer, which will probably start around the end of June, they're much more detailed. I spend a lot of time on every single game, and I will pick a winner and a loser for every single game and make my official record prediction for every single team at that time. So here we go. Let's start with the schedule now. Before I start mentioning any particular game here, just some overall thoughts on this schedule. If you don't make a bowl game this year with this schedule, Jeremy Pruitt's the worst coach in America. Maybe the second worst if Manny Diaz doesn't make a bowl. I did this Miami video a week or so ago, and their schedule is absolutely pitiful. They play one team ranked in the top 25 all year. So their schedule is probably easier than this one. But and this isn't necessarily an easy schedule because you play some good teams. But if you don't make a bowl game with this schedule, something is wrong, and here's why. You have 4 non-con games every year, of course. This year, Tennessee plays a total of 0 Power 5 non-con teams. All 4 of your non-con games are against lower classification teams. You have to win all 4 of those games. Now, we'll talk about some of them in a minute, but you have to win those. Normally, you play at least 1, sometimes 2, rarely 2, Power 5 teams in your non-con. Not the case this year. 4 teams in lower classifications, 0 Power 5 non-con games. You have 8 home games. 8! Now, it wasn't that long ago Tennessee was a tough place to play. Now, lately it's only been tough to play there for Tennessee, not the opposing team. But if you guys can get off to a hot start against some of these terrible teams you play in the beginning of the year, maybe that place can get rocking by mid-season when you have some of these tougher home games and you can win some that you're not supposed to with the help of a home crowd. I mean, it's been a long time since a Tennessee home crowd even saw you play in the fourth quarter in your own stadium. They're usually halfway home by the time the game ends lately. 8 home games. Your rotating game from the West is at home, and it's against Mississippi State. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the West. This schedule sets up for Tennessee to have what for them would be an improved season. In other words, you have got to make a bowl game with this schedule here. Okay, now let's talk about it. Week 1 at home, Georgia State. Georgia State is a good team for the classification that they're in. They have no business competing with Tennessee, even in a Tennessee down year. If you lose that game, in fact, even BYU, you should beat BYU. Now, BYU is a legitimate team. They are considered a Power 5 team by some conferences for scheduling reasons. What I mean is, some conferences have a rule where you have to play... What I mean is that some conferences have a rule that their teams have to play, let's say, 10 Power 5 teams a year. And to meet that qualification, they allow those teams to play BYU, okay? So when I said you play no Power 5 teams, some people do consider BYU a Power 5 team. I don't, because they're stuck in the 1800s. They're an embarrassment and a disgrace of an institution. Not even talking about their football team. They're just a backwoods type of place. I hope you beat them 100-0. But that's not a game you guys can sleep on. I do think that will be, that one has some potential to be an interesting game. Chattanooga, I mean, come on, you should blow them away. And then your schedule really starts. You got to go on the road and play in the swamp at Florida. Florida's going to be a big favorite over you this year. They just are. Florida's probably going to be in the top 10 in everybody's preseason poll. I'm not saying they'll finish there or not. I've done this video for Florida. If you want to watch it, you'll be a huge underdog there. Does that mean you can't win? No. But when we start looking at possible losses in a minute, I mean, come on, that's one we have to at least consider could be a loss. Then you get your first bye week, and then you get Georgia at home. Same situation with Georgia as Florida. Georgia's going to be a huge favorite over you, probably somewhere between 14 and 17 points. I mean, it's going to be a big spread. Then you get Mississippi State at home, a game I think you have to win. And then on the road at Bama. Now, this isn't fair. You have to play Georgia and Alabama in a 3-week period. Now, why isn't Tennessee fan and the Tennessee athletic department and the Tennessee coaches and administration crying about this? You need to cry and rattle some cages, Tennessee, because this just isn't fair. And it's 2019, and all that matters is that everybody thinks everything is fair. It has to be fair. If it's not fair, then you have to complain about it, and they'll change it for you. Right, Barner? So on the road at Bama, at home against South Carolina, huge game in my mind. I think South Carolina is on the verge of falling off the cliff again. This is a must-win game. You get them at home, which is a benefit. South Carolina's got a pretty good home field advantage. So you get them at home, though. You need to win that game. Then you get UAB. UAB may be a more difficult game for you than BYU. UAB is a good team. a good team. They're capable of beating some Power 5 teams every single year. I'm not saying they'll beat you. I'm just saying don't look at this UAB and say, well, they're not a Power 5 team, we'll win that one. This is a game to keep an eye on, especially if for some reason you've already lost, let's say to BYU. No one's gonna freak out if you lose to Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. That's sort of expected. If you lose to BYU or Mississippi State or South Carolina, and for some reason you then lose this UAB game, the fans aren't going to like that. I'll tell you that right now. On the road at Kentucky, one of your wins from last year. I don't think anybody expects Kentucky to be as good this year as they were last year. They lost two of the best players they've ever had, one on offense, one on defense. Benny Snell, running back; Josh Allen, defensive end, outside linebacker. They do get their quarterback returns. Their coaching staff stayed intact, things like that. But I think most people expect them to take at least a little bit of a step back. Another bye week. Last two games of the season at Mizzou, home against your big brother, Vandy. Yes, they're your big brother. I know you own them in the all-time series, but look, I promise you, all those wins you got all those wins you got against Vandy in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, I promise you, they're not helping you today. They're not. And all you got to do is look at your record against Vandy to see what I'm talking about. Have you lost 3 in a row to them? Have you lost like 5 out of 7 or 4 out of 5? I think it's 5 out of 7. Maybe it's 6 out of 8, whatever it is. They've literally owned you. That is priority number one if you're a Tennessee fan. You've got to get back to the point where beating Vandy is just a given. That has to be step one. Before you even think about trying to win the East or consistently competing with Georgia or Florida or God forbid, trying to give Alabama a game, before you even try to get to any of those milestones, you have got to get to the point where you're beating Vandy 8 out of 10 times, okay? It just has to happen. So there it is. That's the schedule. Now, non-con we talked about already, so I'll skip that portion of how I normally do. Away games at Florida, at Bama, at Kentucky, and at Mizzou. You got to go 2-2 there. You got to go 2-2. You got to win at Kentucky, and you got to win at Mizzou. Another team has owned you lately. It's not even worth pointing out the fact that someone's owned you lately. Literally anyone on your schedule has owned you lately. But you got to go 2-2 in those away games. No one's going to expect you to beat Florida and Bama. That doesn't mean you won't. That's not the point of this video, okay? This is best case, worst case. So you got to go 2-2 in those away games, right? Toughest 3-game stretch has got to be Georgia, Mississippi State, and Bama. Georgia and Alabama are 2 top 5 teams preseason. Florida, top 10 team, so they're no slouch either, but you got a bye week after you play them and before you play Georgia, so can't include that in a 3-game stretch. But by far your toughest 3 games. Anybody that's got to play Georgia and Alabama in a 3-game stretch, that's going to be their toughest 3 games, which is why the Barner has been crying about it, for years and finally got it changed. So if everything goes right for Tennessee this year, if the offensive line plays a lot better than it played last year, if Jarrett Guantanamo takes a step forward this year, if Jim Chaney is able to do some things offensively to get you guys going, if you're able to replace all those people, and I think I skipped over this, but all your starters from last year on the defensive line are gone, all of them. And 4 of your top defensive linemen are gone. 3 of them were starters. So you can find some replacements there. If a few of these freshmen that you signed in the 2019 class can step up and contribute in a meaningful way early on, if you get an upset or 2, and if you win all the games you're supposed to win, what's the best case scenario for Tennessee this year? I'm going to say the absolute best case scenario is 8-4, and here's why. I don't think it's not likely that you beat Florida, Georgia, or Bama. That's just not likely this year. So I'm considering those 3 games losses for the purposes of this video. I also don't think, well, let's do it this way. Let's pretend Florida, Georgia, and Bama will all be favored against you for sure, okay? So that's 3 games. That leaves 9. Let's assume you're better than all 9 of those other teams. Let's assume you're going to be favored over all 9 of those other teams. you aren't good enough to win all 9 games, even if you're supposed to win them. So that's why I'm putting the best case at 8-4, okay? I know there's going to be people in the comment section that don't want to hear that, and they're going to want to argue, but if we were to fast forward to next January, and Tennessee went 8-4 in the regular season, every single Tennessee fan is going to be happy and saying, what a big, oh my God, what a great step forward we took. Jeremy Pruitt, year 2, won 3 more games. So, save it. Just come on. All right, worst case scenario. If everything goes wrong, Jeremy Pruitt loses his temper, gets the hothead, drop kicks another whiteboard on the sideline. The offensive line doesn't make enough improvement. Maybe Garantano goes down because that offensive line is so bad and does get hurt or injured. Again, these aren't things I'm wishing. We're looking at worst case scenario here. Maybe some of these freshmen that you're counting on aren't quite ready and can't contribute the way you hoped they could. Maybe you lose a game or 2 that right now look like winnable games. What's the worst case scenario? I don't think you're losing to Georgia State even in a worst case scenario. I do think it's possible BYU beats you in a worst case scenario. Florida, obviously. Georgia. I don't think you're losing to Mississippi State at home. But Bama, I got to consider as a possible loss. I'm going to consider UAB as a possible loss. And this does not mean I expect you to lose these games. We're talking worst case scenario here. Now, your last 3 games after that, Kentucky, Mizzou, and Vandy, I think you're capable of winning all 3 of those games. But again, with this being a worst-case scenario, I'm going to say the worst-case scenario in those last 3 games is that you go 2-1. Is that fair? So that would put you at 6-6 as a worst-case scenario. That would be an improvement over last year. You'd make a bowl game. Not a very big spread there. So basically, I don't see you doing any better than 8-4. I don't see you doing any worse than 6-6. Again, I'll make a more detailed version of this over the summer, and I'll pick an exact winner and a loser for every single game on this schedule, and I'll tell you exactly what I think Tennessee's record will end up being. But what we're doing right now is just sort of an overview of what's going on. Again, I know some of you are going to be upset with some of the things I said and disagree with me, but I promise you, if I were to wake you up next January and tell you went 8-4, you'd be happy. If you went 6-6, I don't think you'd be happy, and I don't think you should be happy, not with this schedule. I know I said in the beginning you got to at least make a bowl game with this schedule. You should be able to win a minimum of 7 games with this schedule, in my opinion. If you go 6-6, I think that would be a disappointment. I think 6-6 would be a disappointment. I think 8-4 would have to be considered a pretty good season, especially if you then went on to win a bowl game, got you to 9 wins or whatever. You guys would be completely unbearable all next offseason if you somehow won 9 games this year. I can't wait. I hope that happens because that makes the meltdown the following year that much more entertaining. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you again real soon. Have a good morning.